The following program is a public access production. Comcast is required to provide time on this channel and make it available pursuant to franchise agreements with the communities we serve. Comcast is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of Comcast or its affiliates.
Hello and welcome to a very special unplugged edition of the Sonny Brightly Show featuring musical guest Jim Wearne, and performing tonight his hit single, Where's Cousin Jack? So without any further hesitation, Jim Wearne.
Many years ago, Cousin Jack arrived. Things were bad in Cornwall, could barely keep alive. But the streets were made of gold in the USA, so he kissed his ma and boarded ship and sadly sailed away. When he landed here, times continued tough. Work was for the finding, some but not enough. Cousin Jack got lonely and he wed a local girl and did his best to fit into this new and foreign world. And where's Cousin Jack? He hasn't been around. He's not out in his fishing boat or even underground. He's not out in the fields or on the city streets. Tell him I asked after him if ever you should meet. Stories are forgotten, memories can dim, humming to yourself a half-forgotten chapel hymn. Fitting in's important, lose the accent soon. Dinner's served at 6 o'clock and lunch is at noon. And let 'em think you're English, what's that matter here? Better pass for Irish and drink the lime green beer. It's what's inside that matters, and you're Cornish through and through, even if the only one who gives a damn is you. And where's Cousin Jack? He hasn't been around. He's not in his fishing boat or even underground. He's not out in the fields or on the city streets. Tell him I asked after him if ever you should meet. And I see the little boy, American as me. He's got a Cornish great-grandfather in his family tree, and a Dane, a Sioux, a German, a Pole, a Serb, a Finn. Somehow poor old Cousin Jack got lost there in the din. And sometimes I encounter a Cousin Jack or Jen. I swear that I'm some glad to see a Cornish face again. But our hair is getting grayer, and some have passed along. Soon they'll look for Cousin Jack and only find a song. And where's Cousin Jack? He hasn't been around. He's not out in his fishing boat or even underground. He's not out in the fields or on the city streets. Tell him I asked after him if ever you should meet. Tell him I asked after him if ever you should meet.
Thank you so much for being on the show. That was it tugged at my heartstrings. Tugged at my heartstrings.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I never thought I would like that kind of music.
Well, thank you.
So really quick, like for example, what is your background? How did you get into this?
Well, I started out like a lot of kids, interested in music. For example, I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
wanted that, of course, like everybody else. And then I discovered how much electric guitars cost. And so,
Yeah, I know, right?
had to refocus. My brother owned an acoustic guitar, which I couldn't play. So I started learning how to play that, and then I discovered folk music and blues. And so I thought, okay, here's something that, A, you can do with a cheap guitar, and doesn't require amplifiers or a band or anything like that. And so I just started doing that, and the usual Michael Row the Boat Ashore and all of that sort of thing.
Oh, so you started like with just the basics.
Oh yeah, the basic hootenanny stuff of the day. This was during the folk scare of the 60s.
There was a folk scare in the 60s?
And the idea was then, after a while, I enjoyed doing it, and I sang things and performed a little bit. But I never felt like I was doing anything that meant something specific to me. Like I'd sing a railroad song. I've never worked on the railroad. I'd sing a work song. At the time, I was like, 17 years old. I'd never done a lick of work in my life.
So you've been doing this since you were like...
Oh, far too long.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I thought to myself, okay, eventually, what should I sing? I thought, well, how about the songs of my people, right? Irish people. Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay.
Irish people sing Irish songs. Scottish people sing Scottish songs. And I thought, okay, so what am I? And it took me a while to figure that out, oddly enough, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I realized that my name and my principal ancestry comes from Cornwall.
Cornwall. Now, where is that exactly?
Okay. If you envision the island of Britain sticking way, way down in the southwest end of it, way off the southwest corner, is a long peninsula. Most of that is Cornwall. There's a river that cuts it off almost entirely from the rest of the island called the River Tamer.
Yeah.
And anything southwest of the Tamer is Cornwall.
Right.
In fact, the river is part of Cornwall. And so it's an ancient Celtic kingdom. You don't usually hear about it in the same way as you hear about Scotland and Ireland and Wales, but it is just as much an ancient Celtic kingdom as they are.
Really? So then, how did you? How did you discover? Were from Cornwall, or your ancestors were from Cornwall?
I discovered it gradually. Let's put it that way.
Oh, okay.
Because I knew from my grandfather, whose parents had come from Cornwall, that they had done that. They had come from Cornwall, and most of my ancestors came from there. And so I thought, well, okay, let's find out about some Cornish songs. Let's learn some, and discovered that's not so easy. Most people have never really heard of Cornwall or Cornish music. Even when I went over there the first time.
Oh, so you went over there? You've been over there?
Yeah, that was about the only way I was going to find anything, and even then it was not easy.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure, I guess you can't buy any of that stuff in Best Buy. I mean,
No.
I know, seriously. I've gone and I've seen, because every now and then I do like some of the Celtic music, some of the the flutes and everything. It's very soothing.
Oh, yeah, it's lovely stuff.
But when you I remember when I first talked to you about this, it was like, wow. I mean, I didn't even know it. I mean, I heard something about it, but I didn't even know it existed.
Exactly.
So when you tell me that you had to go all the way to England, to Cornwall. I'm sorry. I stand corrected. That you had to go all the way to Cornwall to find it. And now, did you find any?
Well, yes, is the short answer, but not nearly as much as I thought I would.
Wow.
And so, research. I won't go on and on, but I did research, and I found songbooks and tapes. At the time, it was all tapes.
Now, how long ago was this?
This was, dear me, pushing 20 years ago, I think, if I remember right.
1990?
Roughly, yeah.
Around there, yeah.
The memory gets a little...
When you say tapes, I think, well, okay.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And so eventually I started building up a repertoire, and even more importantly, I met people. I made contact with people. I found people that could teach me things. And so, for example, one of the first things I learned over there, I'd found this fellow named Trev Lawrence, wonderful storyteller and singer, traditional. And at the time, he was the manager of a pub in the town of Penzance, which is a wonderful place in Cornwall. And I was sitting there at the bar, and he taught me a song. And I didn't have a recorder or anything, and so the lyrics were not terribly challenging. And so I left shortly after, and all the way back to where I was staying, I sang the song to myself
so
over and over.
So you wouldn't forget it.
Right, and then when I got into my room, I pulled out my little pocket recorder and recorded it. So that's the way I gathered these songs, a lot of them.
Oh, so you literally had to go guerrilla style.
Pretty much,
and
yeah.
basically talk to the locals.
Pretty much. And
See,
over
that's
time...
dedication. That's dedication. That's
Over time, I met more and more people. Now some of my best friends are some of the greatest Cornish musicians over there. Just wonderful people of all sorts. And so I've gained a lot from them. Along the line, as well as doing the traditional stuff, I started writing songs of my own. I've always done that.
So you do that's right. That
Right.
first piece you did.
That was one of mine.
Oh, I love this guy. I love it. Love it.
The idea is that I started writing songs that sort of reflect my relationship with Cornwall and being a Cornish American. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Oh, definitely.
But the idea was to sort of continue that progression. Eventually, I realized I'm going to specialize in this, which is both good and bad, in that the gigs aren't thick and fast when you specialize in Cornish music. You have to explain it to a lot of people before.
Now, why do you think that is?
People just have never heard of it.
Yeah, because like when people think about Celtic festivals, they think about Irish or Scottish music. Yeah, so and I would think, if I remember correctly in some of my readings, that Cornwall is Celtic.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm wondering why they got lost in the mix.
Well, very good question. And there are reasons why in America there are a lot of people who have Cornish ancestry and don't know it. The idea is, and this has to do with that question in a wider sense as well, many people emigrated from Cornwall, late 19th, early 20th century, for various reasons, mostly because the mines over there shut down and people came here to mine.
Yeah, it was copper, right? Copper?
Copper, tin.
Yeah, okay.
And they came over to America to mine. Now, at the time, the socio-political situation was that, whereas these people would know they were from Cornwall, obviously, they were convinced, because it was the way things were taught at the time, that they were also English. Especially at that time, Cornwall was thought of, incorrectly, but thought of as part of England. And so people like my great-grandfather would come over, and when he got to immigration, they'd say, "Where are you from?" England. Right. And so the identification became English. And there are many people I've met that have Cornish surnames, or definitely have Cornish ancestors, but think that that person that came over was English.
Now, let me interrupt you for like 3 seconds. Can you give me 3 Cornish surnames? I'm just curious.
Well, a lot of Cornish surnames, not all of them, begin with P-O-L-P-E-N or T-R-E. It's sort of like Irish and Scottish beginning with Mick, Irish beginning with O. So you'd have something like Pendennis, Trevithick, Poldark. That's not a real Cornish name, but there are a lot of names like that. Polglaze is one that is a true Cornish name. At the moment, I don't know when this is being shown, but at the moment they're running Poldark, and that's another matter. It's set in Cornwall, if you don't know. But those are typical Cornish names. Again, many people will have a name like that, Pendennis.
And they just assume it's English.
They think it's English because they look at great-grandfather's immigration papers. It says it came from England. Now, it might say Penzance, England, but they don't realize. And I won't get all political, but Cornwall is really not part of England, and people are starting to deal with that better now.
Now, how are they beginning to deal with that better?
Instead of Cornwall having what's called a county council.
Oh, that's right.
They now have Cornwall Council. And just in the past week, more powers have been granted to it in what they call devolution. They were given a little bit more independence. The idea, of course, is eventually they want to have a setup very much like Wales or Scotland.
Wales or Scotland, their own parliament.
Exactly. Very separate and recognized legally that they are not part of England. The Cornish have been recently recognized as a national minority within the UK, and there are laws on the books saying that Cornwall is not part of England, but it's not recognized officially.
Okay, so give me an example. In the United States, like certain counties have jurisdictions. Okay, are there any loopholes in?
Well, I don't know about loopholes, but for example, if you're in England,
right,
and you die without leaving a will, the person that gets all your money is the Queen.
What?
Well, that's true, yeah, but it is true. But in Cornwall, the person that would get your money would be the Duke of Cornwall, who is also known as the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles. There is a parliament that exists within Cornwall that hasn't met for a long time and is not recognized by anybody but the Cornish. They know who they are, but they've got no powers anymore. So, again, I don't mean to go on and on about the politics, but Cornwall is a separate entity from England, and ethnically as well. DNA testing has proved it, that the Cornish are a Celtic people, like the Irish and the Scots and the Welsh, not at all genetically, ethnically related to the English, who are mostly Anglo-Saxons.
Sonny Brightly really likes, cultures, and especially some of the older cultures that are no longer around or are been suppressed so low that they almost lost their identity. And it almost broke my heart to find out that the last native Cornish speaker died in 1914 was it?
Well, actually, what's said is that a lady named Dolly Pentreath, good Cornish name, died in, dear me, early 1800s, if I recall, and that she was the last Cornish speaker, which isn't true. There are many people that all the way up to the present have spoken Cornish as a second language, only within the family.
Right.
And not maybe as fluently as someone who speaks it as their first language, but still used Cornish words and phrases. There's now a revival of the language, but the Cornish language never really died out.
Right. Yeah, because I hear I've been hearing that they're bringing it back kind of, and they're actually offering it in certain schools in Cornwall.
There are some children that are being raised with Cornish as their first language.
Whoa!
Yeah,
really?
Some families, the parents are fluent Cornish speakers, having learned it, and they are teaching their children Cornish as their cradle language. They're learning English too, of course. But you know how it is that kids can easily grow up speaking two languages.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like Spanish and English, so many kids grow up speaking both fluently without any effort. And it's not a big problem. And there are certain preschools that teach Cornish, and most of the schools teach it as just a matter of interest. And many of the younger kids are developing a real pride in being Cornish, which bodes well for the future. Many of the older generations are skeptical. They were raised, we're English, really.
Exactly, yeah. They've already been indoctrinated. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But the younger people are starting to develop a sense of being Cornish and thinking that it has something good about it, that there is I want to be Cornish.
Absolutely. Now, question, they're bringing everything back and giving a little more identity to Cornwall, or in the UK. But how about here in the States? How many people here are literally, promoting Cornish heritage, Cornish culture?
On one hand, I want to say very few. Now, that's doing a disservice to a lot of people I know.